Hello, my name is David Sutera, and I'm an assistant professor here at Bridgewater State University in the Communication Studies Department. My presentation comes from a book that I'm working on titled The 100 Greatest Superhero Films and TV Shows. Now, my presentation is drawn directly from the introduction of the book, and it covers the development of the superhero film as a distinct genre and its evolution over the years. Defining any film genre can be problematic. Some genres, such as Westerns, have clear bounds in terms of stock characters, settings, narrative tropes, and iconography. Others, such as science fiction, are more difficult to classify because of the ways in which these films incorporate elements from numerous genres. Identifying the iconographic elements of the superhero genre is the first step in establishing it as a distinct genre. Even though the superhero genre is relatively new, it has its own set of icons that are easily recognizable to audiences. Settings, places, and locations where much of the narrative action occurs are among the most fundamental and distinguishable icons of the genre. With some exceptions, most superhero storylines are set in large metropolitan areas like New York City with characters such as Spider-Man. This is also apparent with Superman and Batman, who fight crime in the mythical towns of Metropolis and Gotham respectively, both of which are visually patterned after New York City. At the most basic level, these familiar settings fulfill the audience's expectation regarding where the films commonly take place. In addition, these big city locations offer a ready-made group of vulnerable citizens the superhero must protect from evil, which is an essential part of the superhero genre narrative formula. Another set of icons specific to the superhero genre are the weapons, gadgets, and vehicles associated with certain superheroes. Captain America's shield, Thor's hammer, Spider-Man's web shooters, and Batman's wide range of battle contraptions and Batmobile are all essential items specific to each character that audiences easily identify. The specific costumes with their distinguishable emblems and logos are also iconic elements of the superhero genre. The costumes and logos associated with Batman, Superman, Captain America, Spider-Man, and Wonder Woman, among many others, are immediately recognizable to audiences and fulfill the expectation that a superhero must have their own distinctive costume in order to be an official superhero. In addition, much like the gunfight scene is iconic in the Western genre, the superhero landing is part of the superhero genre's visual iconography. Deadpool calls attention to the superhero landing status as a common superhero stunt when the main character breaks the fourth wall and talks about one of these landings to the audience right before it occurs in the film. Another iconic superhero action sequence is the final battle scene between the main superhero and their adversary, which almost always results in the hero winning out in the end. These icons succeed in establishing the primary elements that lead to further differentiation of the superhero film as a distinct genre. Another important aspect of any film genre is its constellation of familiar characters. Nick Lacey states many genres have characters who can be classified as generic types that can be stereotypical or specific to a genre. For the purposes of this study, superhero stock characters are identified as those who not only possess superpowers, but also non-superpowered heroes who possess some type of exceptional fighting skill and are fantastic device as they battle crime. This means that even though characters such as Batman, Green Arrow, Black Widow, and Hawkeye do not possess any superpowers, they still qualify as generic superhero characters. Other characters such as sidekicks, love interests, mentors, and villains are also consistent in many superhero films, but it is the identification of the superhero character as described above that is singular to the superhero film genre. Identifying the narrative formula is the next step in establishing the parameters of the superhero genre. Thomas Schatz lays the groundwork in defining genres based on their narrative structure, asserting to identify a popular cinematic story formula, then, is to recognize its status as a coherent, value-laden system. Schatz further claims that the plot structure of any particular genre film can be identified in the following sequence of narrative action. First is the establishment of the narrative space via various narrative and iconographic cues of the generic community with its inherent dramatic conflicts. Second is the animation of those dramatic conflicts through the action and attitudes of the genre's constellation of characters. Next is the intensification of the conflict by means of conventional situations and dramatic confrontations until the conflict reaches crisis proportions. Finally is the resolution of the crisis in a fashion which eliminates the physical and/or ideological threats and thereby celebrates the albeit temporary well-ordered community. While there are some minor variations between specific films, this narrative pattern applies to the plot of most superhero films. With this in mind, shot sequence of narrative action is another useful element in classifying a film or TV program as part of the superhero film genre. Along with establishing identifiable narrative structures and stock characters and other iconographic elements associated with superhero films, the evolutionary process of the genre is another important consideration in gaining a more nuanced understanding of the superhero film genre. Henri Focillon, in his 1942 text, The Life Forms in Art, provide a fitting analog to genre evolution in what he calls the lifespan of cultural forms. In the book, he outlines 4 stages of development in any art form, the first of which is what he calls the experimental stage, where conventions are established and isolated. Among the superhero films in the post-classical Hollywood era, Tim Burton's Batman and Batman Returns occupied this experimental stage. With both films, Tim Burton built on the expectations and prior knowledge of the Batman narrative and characters by including familiar visual iconography in recreating the visual landscape of the mythical city of Gotham with great fidelity to the source material. In further applying Focillon's criteria to superhero film genre evolution, the next step is what he terms as the classical stage. This stage is characterized by the moment when conventions reach an equilibrium and are understood mutually by artists and audiences. With this in mind, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and its sequel, Spider-Man 2, along with X-Men and its sequel, X-Men 2, X-Men United, are prime examples of this point of development. These films, which were box office successes and well received by critics, drew on the familiar iconography of the Spider-Man and X-Men universes and helped reinforce a standard narrative formula and stock characters typical of the superhero genre. Even though films such as Daredevil, Elektra, and Fantastic Four were not as well received as the Spider-Man and X-Men films, they too helped establish the parameters and conventions of the maturing superhero film genre as understood by both artists and audiences during this classical phase. The third step in the lifespan of cultural forms applied to the evolution of the superhero genre is the refinement stage. Focillon qualifies this stage as when the art form is so well understood and accepted that the formal and stylistic details are embellished. Ang Lee's 2003 Hulk and Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins occupy this position in the development of the superhero film genre. Ang Lee took liberties with his interpretation of the Hulk storyline in several ways, epitomized by featuring comic book panels as part of the visual storytelling process. Christopher Nolan performed various embellishments through reimagining the visual reality of Gotham City and the Batman narrative universe by focusing on the events that led to Bruce Wayne becoming Batman. Focillon refers to the Baroque stage, which marks the endpoint in the lifespan of cultural forms, as self-reflexive, where the genre becomes the substance or content of the work. While the modern superhero film is still in the refinement stage, the genre has crossed over into the Baroque stage. The most obvious examples are Deadpool and its sequel, Deadpool 2, which feature the wisecracking main character, Wade Wilson, constantly breaking the fourth wall and informing the audience about specific elements of the superhero film genre. Adding to the reflexive quality of the Deadpool films are several intertextual references to numerous superhero films in a comedic manner. Examples include references to a poorly executed rendition of the Deadpool character in X-Men Origins Wolverine, and Deadpool calling attention to the fact that the same actor, Josh Brolin, was cast in 2 separate Marvel Studios films as Cable in Deadpool and Thanos in the Infinity Saga. WandaVision occupies a unique position in the genre evolution and process because it exists somewhere between the refinement and Baroque stages. First, it is in the refinement stage because it experiments with using the television sitcom format as part of its narrative space rather than the traditional world of more superhero programs. On the other hand, it is in the Baroque phase due to the fact that it breaks the fourth wall at various points in the series and calls attention to itself as a superhero program by pointing out some of the cliches of the genre. Regardless, WandaVision is proof that the superhero genre is continuing to grow in terms of its willingness to experiment with different visual forms and narrative content while calling attention to the conventions of the genre in a self-referential manner. While the superhero film genre is relatively new in cinematic history, it has gone through a rapid pace of growth and proliferation. Even though critics such as Martin Scorsese, who asserted that superhero films, specifically Marvel superhero films, are not real cinema, but rather amusement parks, the superhero genre is worth studying in terms of its economic, technological, aesthetic, and social dimensions. With the continued success of contemporary superhero films in terms of audience reception and box office returns, along with the transmedia storytelling potential inherent in the various franchises, the superhero film genre has solidified itself as part of the Hollywood production machine. Consequently, serious examination of superhero films can tell us much about the society in which they were created beyond their considerations as work of art and offer great insight into the forces that shape popular culture. Thank you.